you know that you're getting to the end of the year when you start to have these big event films that have been built up to, especially considering this is part 2 of the Wicked duology. And I am in a privileged position because I have not seen the Wicked musical, which means coming out of Wicked, the first part of the duology, I had no idea where the film went, other than my knowledge of Wizard of Oz, and thinking, well, I'm not quite sure how this will tie into the Wizard of Oz, whether it will remain a prequel, whether it will run alongside the events, or whether it will do some kind of strange prequel-sequel thing. And as is revealed, all 3 are correct. It's interesting because people say that in the musical theatre scene, the trouble you get is the first half is often better than the second. Because often what happens is you build to a big crescendo, you get to the interval, and then the second half really ties up the story and has good beats to it, but that crescendo has already happened and it never quite matches that. And consequently, when you cut a film in 2 and you end the first part with the big crescendo, you essentially are left with the second half being tying up the story, having some decent songs, but again, not matching that same energy that you left that first film with. That being said, I think I'd prefer Wicked for Good just that little bit more. I don't know if it's because things had to be stretched out, and therefore the first half I just had plot beat issues with it, and I just couldn't quite get on board. But when it came to Wicked for Good, it did start a bit slow for me. But once we started to get into the characters, and especially once we got to the Wizard of Oz elements that were now in play in the story, I actually was quite invested. There's a real body horror component to it that I've seen before with, there's a lot of, there's a great desire to make Wizard of Oz type stories that are about body horror, particularly around, you know, the Scarecrow and the Iron and the Tin Man. And I think, yeah, that plays in really nicely, and there is something quite disturbing about their fates, or who will turn into them. And there is some interesting things about the tragedy of the witch, because this is ultimately a tragedy, because we know the fate of the witch from the original story. And so you're thinking, okay, now we're at the point where we've seen her rise, and now we see her downfall. And all those elements do play really well. I also think it has a good couple of songs that are solid. If anything, having it in 2 parts and having a year between them means that, though I do remember Defying Gravity very distinctly, it's not overshadowing the songs that are in the second half, because there are some really sweet and funny and tragic songs that I think have some nice elements to them, and it flows really well. The only parts that I think don't work probably are the Wizard of Oz elements when it gets to, well, specifically around Dorothy, which feels like it has to be very careful to work around. But inexplicably, it's a very small part of the wider story. And I think the story itself just plays so well. The cast have a really nice energy to them. I mean, you know, we still have Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo at the height of their musical abilities. Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Yeoh play great villains. And the supporting cast, again, you have these characters who we've spent the first film getting to know, and then really seeing where they end up is quite interesting, and it's quite compelling. And so, yeah, I don't think it will be as successful as the first one, or have that cultural impact. And some people might say, oh, I tend to just watch the first film and just let it finish there. But I think the second one does at least meet its energy, and it should be considered one film and treated as such, because I think it is worthwhile in its own right.